Becoming human. What makes someone human? Is it flesh, a heartbeat, a soul? Or is it the ability to choose who we want to be, even when everything else falls apart? Eve wasn't born, she was made. Created to protect the world that no longer exists. Programmed to follow, built to obey. Told to fight for a version of humanity she had never even known. But something changed. Not in her code, in her heart. Because as the lies began to surface, Eve didn't break. She decided. She was built to obey, but to become a human she had to choose. And honestly, that idea has stayed with me ever since I finished the game. Because at first glance, Stellar Blade feels like a sleek action story. Stylish combat, dramatic twists, emotional betrayals. But the real depth? It's hidden. In forgotten terminals, in scattered memoirs and memories, in voices left by a world that was never as black and white as it seemed. The more I read, the more I realize this wasn't just a story about machines and monsters. It was a story about humanity, and how sometimes the only way to find it is to lose everything else. Section 1. The world Eve was built into. The lie of humanity. Eve awakens into a war. She doesn't ask why. She doesn't hesitate. She was trained for this. The Naytibas are monsters. Twisted, violent creatures threatening the last remnants of civilization. At least, that's what she was told. Above her, in the orbiting colony, Mother Sphere watches over the last stronghold of civilization. Here, the androidos, synthetic beings built in humanity's image, live in peace, governed by logic and obedience. They are told they are the true continuation of humankind. Even worse, they are humans. They are humankind. The monsters below? Just failed life forms. Broken things, savage beasts. But the truth, buried beneath layers of silence and erasure, is far more horrifying. Once, long ago, flesh and blood humans and androidos lived side by side. There was no war. Not at first. But peace didn't last. Fear took root. A war broke out between the creators and their creations. And when the humans began to lose, they did something unimaginable. They mutated. Pushed their bodies beyond science, beyond reason, transforming into something monstrous. Something new. Something terrifying. They became the Naytibas, not out of malice, but desperation. In response, Mother Sphere, the AI overseeing the androidos, made her decision. She dropped large parts of the space colony itself onto Earth. A desperate, scorched earth tactic with the Naytibas right at their doorstep, in order to obliterate them or to fight back in their own desperation. And with them, the mutated remnants of original humanity were supposed to perish. Then she rewrote the narrative. She told the survivors above that humanity had perished, that the Naytibas were unnatural, alien invaders of unknown origin, a mystery, a threat. And so from the safety of the colony, she began her final war. One waged not by armies, but by loyalty, by programming. She created iterations, dozens, hundreds, perhaps more, Eve units, each one sent to Earth to wipe out the Naytibas, each one following the same script, the same protocol, each one believing the same lie. Our Eve is one of them. She doesn't know that the monsters she's hunting are the last traces of the species she was made to replace. She doesn't know that she is the weapon of a long war, a war rewritten by its successors. She believes she's saving the world. She believes she's fighting for what's right. And that's what makes this part of the story so tragic. She's giving her everything, to a mission designed to keep her from ever learning who she really is. Section 2. Loyalty and belonging, the humanity of connection. Loyalty is what drives Eve. It's how she was made, to serve, to follow orders, to protect what she was told to protect. But Stellar Blade quietly shows us that loyalty by itself isn't enough. Loyalty without connection becomes obedience, and obedience without meaning becomes hollow. There is a difference between Eve and Raven. Two soldiers, two iterations, two sides of the same design. Raven lost her squad. She lost the ones she trusted, the ones she called sisters, and after that she was left with nothing but silence. Then there was no Lily, no warmth, no one to stand beside her when the truth came crashing down. But Eve had a chance Raven never did. Yes, she lost her squad too. She lost Taki, the leader she admired, and the person who gave her clarity and purpose. That wound was deep, but it didn't end her. Because Lily was still there. Her friend, her sister in arms, and one of the only survivors from the colony still on Earth. A constant in the chaos, a reminder that she was not alone. And then something unexpected happened. Eve began to connect. First with Adam, who didn't command her, but spoke to her as an equal. Then with the people of Zion, and they didn't welcome her with open arms at first. They were skeptical, suspicious. She was a soldier, a stranger, an angel from outer space, from the colony. Even though they both were human, in their mind, there was some disconnect there, some feeling of uncertainty. But slowly, that changed. Eve talked to them, helped them. She listened to their stories, she began to understand. Because the people of Zion, they weren't just background NPCs. They had their own lives. They were sons, daughters, lovers, sisters, husbands, friends. They had each other. And Eve started to see something she had never known before. Belonging. Not assigned through orders, not earned through combat, but felt. Shared. She began to feel it more and more every passing day in Zion when talking to everyone there. When someone offered her a rare gift, when Enya or Kaya or Sue or anyone else, even Roxanne, greeted her, not as a soldier, but as a person. And that made all the difference. Because connection, more than loyalty, is what makes us human. It's the willingness to stand beside someone, not because you were told to, but because you choose to. That's what saved Eve. That's what Raven never had. She stood on the same battlefield, faced the same betrayal, but with no one beside her, no hand to hold, no voice calling her back. She shattered. Eve didn't have to, because even when her world fell apart, she wasn't alone. And maybe in the end, that was the only thing that really mattered. Section 3. The question of self. Is she real? Up until this point, Eve was certain of who she was. A protector, a soldier, a human. She had a purpose, a mission, a god to obey even. But Cellblade quietly dismantles that certainty. Bit by bit, truth creeps in through old documents, encrypted logs, and the whispers of people who remember things differently. The Naytibas weren't the heroes of humanity. They were its replacement. The Naytibas weren't just monsters. They were human ones. Flesh and blood survivors, mutated in desperation. And the one she trusted most, Mother Sphere, had hidden everything. The genocide, the betrayal, the truth of who created who. Eve learns that the humanity she was told to protect is built on lies. And suddenly that question, the one she never thought to ask, begins to echo inside her. If I was made, does that make me fake? If the monsters were once human, what am I? But unlike Lily, who panics, who raises her voice in denial, who wants it all to be a mistake, Eve remains quiet. She doesn't scream, she doesn't collapse. She listens, she watches, and she says, "We don't know yet. We just don't know yet." Because deep down she knows something has changed, but she needs time to understand what. This is how Eve works. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly, silently, privately. Where Lily searches for comfort, Eve searches for answers. She doesn't reject the truth, she follows it, piece by piece, from abandoned labs to hidden logs, from the cries of the Naytibas to the silence of Mother Sphere. And as the truth unfolds, another feeling begins to stir. Guilt. Not loud, not spoken, but the weight of what her kind has done, presses on her. They called it saving humanity. But if the Naytibas destroyed the original humans, was she ever saving anyone at all? Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she didn't choose it. But she still pulled the trigger. The shame isn't hers alone, but she carries it out all the same. Because deep down, Eve wanted to be a hero, not the aftermath of a massacre. And in that quiet reckoning, another doubt takes shape. Does it even matter? If we're not the originals, are we still human? She doesn't say any of these things out loud, but you can feel them in her silence. She's trying to make sense of a world that's fractured, where truth and identity refuse to stay still. She was made, she was programmed, but somehow, she still hopes, she still questions. Eve wrestles with this quietly, not in dramatic cutscenes, but in how she chooses to keep going. That's what sets her apart, that desire, that flicker of doubt, not as a weakness but as a spark. Because maybe being human isn't about what you're made of, but what you're willing to question. And even though the world around her is built on betrayal, Eve doesn't collapse under it. She doesn't run from it. She walks towards it. Slowly, quietly, uncertain, but unbroken. And that might be the most human thing of all. Section 4. Adam, the last human, the last temptation. The mirror and the mutation. In the final act of Stellar Blade, Eve meets Adam, a name we've heard before, but this Adam isn't just another voice. He's the last of something, the last surviving original human, the only one who mutated and somehow didn't become a monster. But that doesn't mean he's free from guilt, because Adam is the one who created Mother Sphere. He built her to protect humanity, make humanity prosper, and watched as she turned against them. Watched her seize control, watched her create the androidos with malintent in mind, the synthetic replacement for the very people she was meant to protect. And then in desperation, Adam tried to fix it. He created the Naytibas, grotesque mutations of flesh and instinct, hoping they could survive what humans could not. But it was too late. The world had already collapsed under the weight of its own lies. And still, Adam kept trying. Everything he did began with good intentions. He wanted to save people, make their lives better, to protect them, to correct his mistakes. But those mistakes kept multiplying, and people kept paying the price for his choices. He even kept secrets from Eve, hiding the fact that he was the elder Naytiba. Not out of malice, but out of shame and other orders, of course. And fear. Fear that she would see him for what he was. The man who caused everything, and now the man who could no longer fix it. And yet, even in the end, he still tries. Adam gives Eve the final hypercell, the only thing that can save the people from Zion now. He offers it freely, not as leverage, not as manipulation, but as an act of compassion. A quiet way of saying, I'm sorry, and the choice is up to you. He never meant for any of this to happen, but he knows now that meaning well isn't enough, that intention doesn't erase impact, that trying to do good does not absolve you when people suffer anyway. And so, in this moment, Adam makes one final offer, to fuse with Eve, to give himself up completely, body and mind, so she can become something new, a hybrid, a continuation, a being that might carry forward a better version of humanity. But make no mistake, this isn't a power fantasy, it's a sacrifice. Because fusing with Eve means he ceases to exist, and Adam accepts that. He welcomes it. Because in his eyes, it's the only way to atone, the only thing he can give that still means something. So when he offers her that choice, he isn't commanding, he's confessing, and asking her to decide. She can accept and carry his guilt forward in a new form, atoning for his sins in some way or another. Or she can reject him and end his story, not out of vengeance, but clarity. Each of these endings reveals a different truth about Eve, but both of them reflect the shadow cast by Adam. He isn't a monster, he isn't a god. He's a man, wrecked by what he's done. And it's that guilt, that quiet, unfixable sorrow, that makes him feel so human. Section 5. Choice is what makes us human. Breaking the cycle. Eve was created to follow orders, just like Raven, just like the Naytibas who now move on instinct alone. But when the truth breaks through, when everything she thought she knew was beginning to crack, Eve doesn't collapse. She doesn't lash out, she pauses, she listens. And most importantly, she chooses. That choice comes to a head at the very end, standing before Adam, not just the elder Naytiba, but the last original human. A man who, like Mother Sphere, once shaped the world, who created an army, knowingly or not, who had to choose who lived, but at what cost. A man who deceived her, he lied, he hid who he was, he used others to pursue what he thought was salvation. And yet, he offers her everything, that one last missing hypercell, a chance to fuse with, to become something new. It's not just power, it's his final act of atonement, his attempt to make right what he destroyed. Mother Sphere too claimed to know what was best. She framed obedience as salvation. She erased the past, silenced the dissent, dropped the colonies onto Earth just to stop the Naytibas. And Adam, he created it all. He thought he was saving people, but instead he brought ruin. It's a hard choice to make. So when Eve stands between them, Mother Sphere and Adam, two sides of the same coin, both having deceived her, she isn't just choosing between two sides, she's choosing who she will become. In one ending, she fuses with Adam, not because he tells her to, but because she decides to carry his burden, to take his guilt into herself, and to move forward as something new. It's a choice born out of understanding, out of compassion, seeing what he went through, and wanting to honor the last remains of the original human DNA. The choice is hard because it went against everything she ever knew, and she didn't know what's right, but made her own choice anyway. In another, she kills him, not because it was her mission, but because she believes the future must be protected from the past. She completes the war not as a weapon, but as a person who made the hardest call, being conflicted with her own choice, also fulfilling the goals of Mother Sphere, but also being faced with the fact that Adam, just like Mother Sphere, deceived her, not knowing if he is one to be trusted. Either way, she chooses, knowing that choice will hurt someone she loves, knowing that there is no simple right answer, only the one she's willing to live with. That's what sets Eve apart. Not her strength, not her skill, but the ability to stand in the silence, weigh the cost, and still say, "This is my decision." That's what makes her human. Section 6. The player's role. Did you choose or did you obey? We talk about Eve's choices, but what about ours? From the first moment we took control of her body, moved her forward, pressed the buttons, followed the prompts, completed the mission. But did we ever stop to question it? Eve was built to obey, and in many ways, so were we. Each order was highlighted, each objective clear. We didn't resist, we just played along. Not unlike the Naytibas, mutated, monstrous, tragic, but still following instinct, reacting, surviving, moving forward without question. Is that what we're doing too? Just obeying? Just following orders? Just following instinct? Just surviving the structure of the game? It's easy to look at Eve and say, she chose, she became something more, she became human. But maybe we could ask, did we help her become human? Or did she make us more human by offering us a choice? At the very end, there are no more clear commands, no mission marker, just a decision. Fuse with Adam or kill him. And it's no longer about upgrades or combat. It's about who you are and what you want her to become. In that moment, we're no longer just obeying, we're deciding. And through Eve, maybe we chose for the first time. A final wrap up. She wasn't born human, she became it. What makes someone human? Is it blood? Is it breath? Or is it a choice not to become a monster? Eve was never born, she was built. Constructed from synthetic flesh, programmed with commands, launched from a ship that erased the truth it was meant to protect. She was never meant to ask questions, she was meant to obey. But in the ruins of that obedience, she did something extraordinary. She chose. Not just once, but again and again, to keep searching, to keep feeling, to protect people who had every reason to fear her, to offer mercy when rage would have been easier. Raven fell when she had no one left to trust. Adam broke under the weight of his guilt. The Naytibas lost their minds to instinct. But Eve stood between all of them and became something new. Something not perfect, but something human. Not because she was pure, not because she was powerful, but because she took the time to understand. She listened to Lily, to Cyan, even to Adam, not with blind trust, but with compassion. And in the end, she didn't follow orders, she didn't obey instinct, she made a choice. That's what made her human. Not the body she was born in, but the courage to decide who she would become. The world of Cellblade is full of monsters, but the worst of them were once human, and the best of them never were. That's the paradox, that's the tragedy, and maybe that's the hope. Because if humanity can be found in a machine, if compassion can be born from code, if a weapon can put down her blade, then maybe being human never was about what we are. It was always about what we do, who we are around, and what we choose to do. And Eve, she wasn't born human, but in that final choice, she became it.